Welcome to the Craft of Coaching podcast, where we dive into what it truly takes to become a skilled, confident life coach. I'm your host, Kate, head of the CLCC or Credentialed Life Coach Collective, an ICF accredited Level 1 coach training program. We combine courage, coaching, and community to offer you more than just a training program, but a life-changing experience where you use your own personal transformation as the learning ground for supporting your clients. On this podcast, we explore how you can use coaching skills to support your clients or expand your own growth, all grounded in evidence-based coaching practices. Learn more about our program and get free resources for becoming a life coach at teamclcc.com. And now, here's today's episode. Have you ever had a client come to you and they need support about things that are going on at work? And you're coaching them, you're reminding them to keep the focus on what they can control, because that's the only place that they can really affect any change. They can't make other people behave differently. And yet, work is really dragging them down. It's really a struggle. And you're wondering, how else can I support my client? Well, today, I'm talking with someone who has really cracked the code on how to intervene and influence. You can't control it, but you can influence the behavior of the people you work with. And specifically, one of the hardest behaviors to influence, the person who manages you. Today on The Craft of Coaching, we're talking with Melody Wilding. She gives people the tools to feel in control at work and get what you want from those in power. She's a background as a therapist, a speaker, an executive coach, and she's now also a best-selling author of the book, Managing Up. And today, we are going to have a conversation about the ways in which you might be able to help reframe or support the way that your clients are showing up at work in a situation that seemingly they wouldn't be able to influence. But Melody is going to give direct examples of exactly how you can, in fact, shift things. And I think this will be really helpful for any coaches who have had those clients who keep saying, work is dragging me down, or for you as a coach. If you're someone in corporate, we get a lot of those people in the CLCC coach training program who are going, I need some kind of expanded skill set if I'm going to survive working in corporate. And it's like, yeah, coaching is that skill set. So if you're the person who actually needs today because you're going nuts with a boss or a manager who is not so great, Melody is here to help. So let's dive in. All right. Well, we get a real treat today. Melody Wilding, who is an author, a speaker, has done an enormous amount of executive and organizational work, gets to join us today on The Craft of Coaching. And I'm so thrilled to have you here. So thank you for being here. I'm hopeful that today our conversation can speak to a couple of different things about that executive leadership coaching, that organizational development coaching world, because that's where you draw so much expertise. So welcome to The Craft of Coaching.
Thank you. I am so honored to be here. Have followed you for at least 10 years. And now to be a colleague of yours, it's a full circle moment for me. So I'm so excited for this conversation.
Oh, that's really great. Oh, fantastic. Well, let's get a little bit of your story. Would you share a bit with us about how you got into organizational coaching? Kind of where did you start? And then how did you get to where you are today?
I started my coaching practice about 15 years ago now. So it was a very different world, very different landscape. And at that time, coaching was still seen as something that was remedial or something that you were given if you were an underperformer. It wasn't really regarded as a high performance tool in the way it was, or it is now rather. And so I had my own private coaching practice that I really built from the ground up based on writing content online. Mm-hmm. That has always been the backbone of my business. It continues to be the backbone of my business today, writing articles for different sites. And I was struck at the right time to catch the wave of Google SEO. Now it is very much AI SEO, which is a totally different game because Chat GPT is now bringing clients to me, which is bizarre. Um, but I built up my individual coaching practice that way. And how that started to morph into organizational coaching is people would say, well, I would like my employer to pay for this because it's executive coaching, it's leadership coaching, it's helping me perform better at my role. And so can you work with them to take the payment? And that's really how it began. So even today, sometimes we will have individuals come to us and the company is sponsoring their coaching, or they are just, using their corporate card and it's part of their professional development. Sometimes companies, I have a small group of companies that I work with where I'm sort of on their roster of coaches, or I get referred internally to work with leaders or high performers there. And many times it also comes off of speaking, where I may do a keynote or a training for the organization, and it looks like different things. Sometimes people will come to me and sign up independently to one of my programs, or sometimes an organization will say, this has been great. We want to keep the skills going. We don't want this to end with this one training. So we would love to put a cohort of people through this program. And so it's I think, like in most things in business, it's never just one thing. You're sort of responding to people's needs and how the market is evolving. So that's a little bit of what it's looked like.
Yeah, well, two things. One, I want to make sure listeners take away that you did not have to build your business by doing silly dances on social media, which I know is a huge block for a lot of people who are coaches, because they feel like, they see those videos and the memes and things like that on social media, and they kind of go, I mean, it's funny, but like, I would feel too silly to do that. I hear that you built through hard work, referrals, leveraging SEO, and things of that nature, and branching out from there. And then the other thing I'm really curious about is, when you had a private coaching practice, did you always know you wanted to do organizational coaching, or did you do more personal coaching and pivot into organizational?
I began doing more personal coaching because I was more so focused on stress and burnout management, and gradually found that actually the pieces that I was more effective at and that I enjoyed doing more were some of the tactical leadership, scaling yourself, advancement, managing up, influence, which matches with my background. How I got into this work originally is I was a psychology researcher and I became a therapist, and my just life philosophy and approach aligns much more with coaching. And so that's really where have focused the vast majority of my career. But I did begin focusing more on work-life balance, and it is evolved over time. The other thing I will say is something I've become much more intentional about. I could always do better at it, is in my marketing for my programs or individual coaching. I would come right out and say, this is something your employer may sponsor. If you want support with that, I'm happy to talk about it on our consult, or we're happy to provide you with a PDF or a sample letter that you can give to your manager or make the request from HR, which really reduced the friction and the fear that people felt. Because a big hangup I would find is people wouldn't want to approach their boss and almost confess that they needed coaching. And so having language and having support and framing around how to have that conversation helped a lot of them get over that hump and successfully secure approval, because it is framed as, here's the business ROI and here's how it's going to help me bring more value, not I'm weak and I'm asking for support because of that.
That is such a smart takeaway. And it's such a simple thing once you actually say it. Connect the value of coaching to the value for the organization, and then they are more likely to endorse it. Yeah.
Exactly. And another thing that I've done that has been very successful is I have a proprietary assessment that I've developed. It was a part of my first book. It's called the Strive Diagnostic. And what has been surprising, I didn't expect this, is that um, people would take that, especially for individual coaching. They would take it at the beginning, the midpoint, and the end of coaching. And it started to become something that people would share with their managers because they would get a visual of how they were growing in certain areas, things like assertiveness and decision making and things like that. And so they would share this visual with their manager. And it became a selling point to continue in coaching for them to say, oh, wow, I've made a 70% improvement in terms of my emotion regulation. I'm sure you've seen that show up in how I present in meetings and how I'm dealing with clients. And their boss would agree, and it would make the renewal conversation that much more seamless. So that was a big surprise. And what I would encourage other coaches is to think about how can you give your clients those tangible results that they can present to the decision makers.
Oh, that is such a smart strategy, because it's like, as you know, in one-on-one sessions, typically coaches will have checkpoints. Let's say it's a 3-month personal coaching agreement. And usually there's some kind of checkpoint at about the halfway point. And at 3 months, do you want to renew? And a review of like, what is it you've accomplished? What did you establish as your primary focus when we started? But when that's all verbal, then it's for the recipient's benefit only. But I just think you're laying out such a smart strategic approach to aligning what you're trying to bring with business goals, so that it just becomes I don't even have to think about how am I going to justify this? Yeah,
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, let's get into times when things are a little trickier in the workplace. The issues that you bring up in your new book, Managing the Manager, center around what to do when people above you in an organizational hierarchy are not managing well. They're not managing you well, and it's impacting your own career. And I know that a lot of direct reports feel ill-equipped to manage their own managers. A lot of managers never receive manager training, and that's part of how this happens. And so just thinking about the fact that there could be listeners today who are coaching clients, and the clients come and they say, my job sucks, and it's all because my manager sucks. And they're grappling perhaps with how to coach their client in a situation like that, where the client doesn't have a lot of control. I'm curious about where you would suggest a coach in that kind of position starts to provide the best support for their client in that situation.
Well, what's been really fun is I've had so many colleagues and fellow coaches, even HR professionals come to me and say, we are using your book almost as a training manual for helping our people influence better and managing up. Because the way I structured the book is around 10 conversations you need to have with your manager in order to gain the recognition, the respect that you want. And so the book is really built around this roadmap of the first 5 being the most foundational conversations you need to have, and the latter 5 build on those. They're more advanced. But those first 5 start with alignment, styles, ownership, boundaries, and feedback. And so if I was talking to a colleague about this who had a client who was in this situation, starting with those first 2, alignment and styles, is by far the most fundamental. It's what everything else is built on. And alignment, as the name suggests, is really about getting on the same page with your leader about what success looks like. Because some leaders are not great at articulating that or not forthcoming about it. And a lot of people that we coach, they are former, gold star good kids who keep their head down. They just do their work, but then they feel like they're reacting to everything that comes their way. And they get in these cycles of, I'm working hard, but maybe not on the right things that are meaningful to my leadership and moving my career forward. So alignment is asking some of those nuanced questions that get deeper than, well, what are your top priorities right now? right? It's really understanding what keeps your manager up at night. If they flash forward 3 months, what does success look like? What would they be happy to report up their chain of command? And that gives you so much insight to then align yourself with those activities, or at least have a conversation about rejiggering your workload or reprioritizing so you can. So that's the first one. The second one, styles, is also extremely important and so overlooked. And before we started recording, you and I were saying, some people just have a difficult manager. A lot of people come to me and say, my boss is toxic, which I completely understand. And yes, there are a lot of situations where you are better off leaving. But what I find more times than not is what people perceive as difficult behavior in another person is often just a matter of difference in the way we communicate. And nowhere is that more true than someone's relationship with their boss. So to give you an example, I had a past client who was a C-suite executive, so very accomplished person who was in a fast-growing organization, reported to the CEO, and she was a chief people officer. And so when she would have her one-on-ones with the CEO, she would come and say, okay, here's where our attrition is up, our morale, we're having some issues with people not being satisfied with the onboarding process. So I think we should look at that. And I wanted to talk about our hiring plan for the next quarter. And the CEO would cut her off, get very frustrated with her. And she was just besides herself because she felt like she was doing everything right and being attentive and thorough. And yet her boss was just being such a jerk to her. And what we uncovered is that really he just had a totally different communication style and lens that he was approaching value through and evaluating these exchanges. To her, as being a chief people officer, she was very relationship oriented. She wanted stability and harmony, wanted people to be happy. She was approaching these one-on-ones as time to unpack and discuss problems. He was not. He was approaching it as, I want the bottom line. I see this as bang, bang, bang. I want to get through these things. I want to get in. I want to get out. And I want you to come to me with the point of view and tell me how we're moving forward, not what's holding us back. And so once she could make those changes and slight reframing and how she was presenting the same content, it started to change very quickly. And she went from the breaking point for her, which led her to reach out to me, was the CEO said to her, I'm not sure if you're in over your head in this role, incompetent, or both.
My God.
And yes. So that was like her last straw to reach out to me and say, something needs to change here. I'm not going to be in this role much longer. To flash forward about 6-8 months after that, she emailed me and said, he sees me as his right hand now, to the point where he gave me a 6-figure bonus worth 1.2 times my salary. And that can be the power of learning to flex and not fawn, not just totally contort yourself to someone else's style, but to recognize, how can I speak to them and get through to them rather than talk at them or past each other.
There's so much to unpack there, though, because I can't help but come from a lens of just going, seeing a gender issue here, because I think it's very, very common for women in the workplace to need to shift and accommodate their communication styles to, when there's a role power differential involving a man, to accommodate what the man is wanting. That's a whole separate podcast we could probably spend an hour on, though. But it sounds like the good news, though, is that the communication styles then ultimately were able to align. And in particular, she's then saying, I no longer feel like I'm tearing my hair out coming to this job every day.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And that it helped them build trust and rapport to where she could express herself. So for example, he was, and you're right, there is such a gendered lens to this. I won't argue that. But there came a point where he was a critical and nitpicky type of person by nature. And she had built up enough trust with him and had strengthened their relationship enough where she could point blank say to him, I respect that we always have room for improvement. I respect that. I want to hear that. But at the same time, I need to understand what is going well so I can replicate that and get even better results for you and the team. Do you think there is room for that in our conversations? And if so, I'll start adding into our one-on-ones what's going well before we get into understanding what could be better. And he kind of paused and was taken aback that she would even bring that up because she had never been as assertive or clear about it before. But it really changed the tenor of their relationship for her to even make that simple ask. Yeah.
Well, I love that example because that's such a tricky one. And the thing I love the most about that example is how you're laying out that there is an alternative path that is really, I hear, an empowered path that is not just, oh my gosh, I have to grit my teeth and deal with this or find another job. Or tell the person, how dare you talk to me that way? And then it, becomes escalated and things of that nature. So, this is like a very sticky and common work situation in my experience as well. It's like, how do you deal with someone who has role power over you and the way they're speaking to you? Really just is it doesn't sound like they're bringing self-awareness to the conversation. And so then you're having to do the work of bringing that self-awareness and shifting in communication. It's very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. It can be very loaded. And that's why I say, even if you can understand that people have different lenses that they may come at this with, right? Some people are going to be more concerned with the process and the methodology and the logic behind your idea or your proposal. Other people want to understand the vision, the mission. How is this bringing energy into the team? Other people want to understand, how are we honoring history? We don't want to rock the boat too much. How are people going to be affected? We want to make sure we're seeking consensus. And any of those lenses, like for example, I could think the person seeking stability, if I don't understand that is their baseline and where they're coming from, I could interpret that as, why are you slowing us down? We're trying to move ahead, right? Or the person who really wants to understand the methodology and may ask a lot of questions. Why are you being so nitpicky? Why don't you trust my recommendation, right? So it really helps us get out of that emotional reactivity to other people's behavior and maybe see it a bit more objectively so we can respond from a more grounded place about it.
Yeah. And hopefully the coaches listening to this are getting the takeaway that these are all human problems, right? Like what we're triggered by, our preferences around communication, feeling resistance to change. Like, yes, you might have a group of stakeholders in an organization feeling resistance to change, but the psychology of that group and their resistance to change and their self-doubt about, can we take on this risk? It probably mirrors a lot about the individual process or reaction to, I'm not certain about this change. I don't know if I can take on this risk.
100%.
Yeah. Well, I'm also curious to know more about how speaking has been part of your career trajectory and how you got those first speaking gigs. And in particular, what advice or suggestions you have for Craft of Coaching listeners who are wanting to add speaking to what they offer, but they're starting with like no speaker reel. They don't have the invitation. It's like, how do I break in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking has over the years become a strong pillar of my business. It certainly wasn't in the beginning. It was very heavily weighted in individual one-on-one coaching. I would say 95%, maybe speaking was 5%. And I would say now I do about, probably 60% group programs, 40% speaking, and very, very little one-on-one coaching now. It's like 1%. So it has really evolved over the years. But when I all that to say, I didn't have a Rolodex starting out. And what I did actually was I joined professional communities, so women's networking communities that had not just other coaches in there, but other women who were in corporate or nonprofits, different organizations. And I would offer my talks for free. I did start out there. And I got a few of those under my belt. And in exchange, I was clear that, I'm offering this pro bono. And in exchange, if you are satisfied with how it goes, I would like to have a testimonial from you that I could use on my website or a recommendation on LinkedIn. Sometimes I would also ask for, and they would allow me to take photos or record parts of it. If they were going to be recording and it was high quality video, I would ask to use that. And so that created this flywheel of I could use the testimonials on my website to create credibility. I could post photos or, on social media that I was going to speak somewhere and share that feedback as well. And so other people would see that and start to think of me as a speaker. And I would also ask those organizers, do you know anyone else? Do you have peers at other companies that might be looking to bring this type of content to their employee resource groups or a small leadership team? And it began building from there to the point where there became a flip at a certain point where I started to get more inbound than I was having to do outbound going to get those gigs. And of course, over time, I went from free to charging a few $100s to charging a few $1,000s, and just gradually, just as you would with your coaching rates, sort of notch it up over time. But now it's really all inbound based on my content that is out there. So if someone is searching for managing up or communication topics at work, they will come across me, they'll read my articles, they'll reach out directly. They have maybe watched one of my LinkedIn learning courses. I put a lot of short form video out there so people can see how I deliver and frame topics. And so all of those things come together, but now it's primarily inbound. Although when I had my book coming out, I did do some of that outreach to decision makers at companies to say, hey, would you love a copy of my book? This may be something you want to bring to the folks at your company and your team. And that worked very well as well. So if you have a book, if it's traditionally published or self-published, offer that as a resource. It gives you a reason to follow up with people to say, hey, did you enjoy that? If you're, booking speakers for your conferences or your series, what are you looking for? And to start the conversation that way.
Oh, this is so great. You've just given so much fantastic, actionable strategy for tasks and to-dos that people can literally go, all right, I've listened to today's episode. I can now do these things that she's describing. So thank you so much for providing this incredible value. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with before we close today?
I think let's see. Those are the things that come to mind. When I wrote this book, it came from one of my favorite phrases, which I am going to guess you have said this as well, which is you teach people how to treat you.
Yes.
And, I think that is very true, whether you are a coach who is selling your services B2C, just trying to get people to work with you, or you are within an organization, the way you respond to challenges and questions, the way you make yourself available, it all shapes how other people respond to you. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for leaving us with that. And again, thank you so much for being on The Craft of Coaching today. It's been a pleasure to have you here. Melody Wilding, melodywilding.com. Everything will be linked in the show notes, and definitely check out her books. And thank you again for being a guest today.
Thank you.
All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Before you go, would you help us out and take a moment to give us a rating in iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening? It really helps us get the word out to other listeners. And before you go today, would you like free resources to support your coaching journey? Whether you're considering becoming a coach or you want advanced coach skills training, access our coaching resource library at teamclcc.com. Again, that's teamclcc.com. Can't wait to connect with you. And again, thanks for listening.